AITA for my 16th birthday, my parents gave me a young mother's course, even though I told them I wanted an iPhone. I refused to take it, so my parents came up with something else for me. I have been reading a lot of those super long, dramatic Reddit posts lately, and honestly, I never thought I would be writing something like this myself. But here I am, sitting in my room, still feeling equal parts furious, confused, and hurt, trying to figure out if I am the one who is completely losing touch with reality, or if my parents have genuinely lost their minds. For some context, I just turned 16 a few weeks ago. My family is what I would call middle class. My dad works in IT, and my mom is a primary school teacher. We are not rich by any stretch of the imagination, but we are also not struggling to put food on the table or anything like that. We live in a pretty average house in a pretty average neighborhood, and I have never felt like we were particularly deprived. I do not get everything I want, obviously, but I never expected to either. So, about a month before my birthday, my parents asked me if there was anything specific I wanted this year. Normally, they just get me whatever they think is nice, like clothes or books or sometimes something small I mentioned offhand. But this year, they were more direct about asking, which made me think that maybe they were planning something bigger. I was actually excited, because I have had the same phone for almost 4 years now, an old iPhone that was already used when I got it, and it is pretty much falling apart at this point. The screen is cracked, the battery barely holds a charge, and it randomly shuts off even if it says it has 30% left. I am not the type of person who usually asks for expensive things, but this time I figured, okay, they asked, so I might as well be honest. I told them I would really love a new iPhone. I even made it clear that I did not expect the latest one or anything crazy. Just something functional, something that would not die halfway through the day, and something that did not look like I found it in a recycling bin. They did not really say much at the time. My dad made a face, and my mom said something vague about how phones are a big expense. I figured that was fair, so I did not push it, and honestly, I would have been happy with literally anything that worked. I was just excited they even asked what I wanted. Fast forward to my birthday. I woke up kind of hopeful, even though my parents are not usually the big surprise party type. Still, I thought we would at least have a nice dinner and cake and all that. My parents handed me a wrapped box, and I could tell from the size that it definitely was not a phone, but I figured, okay, maybe it is something small and they will surprise me later. I opened it, and inside was a certificate. It took me a second to process what it even said. It was a prepaid voucher for something called the Young Mommy Prep course. At first, I actually thought it was a joke, because what 16-year-old gets a baby care class as a birthday present? But they were completely serious. It was all about learning how to take care of newborns, change diapers, prepare baby food, all this stuff for new moms. I literally sat there staring at it, trying to figure out if I was in some kind of alternate reality. I asked them if they were serious, and they both acted like it was the most thoughtful and responsible gift in the world. My mom started going on about how these were essential life skills for a young woman, and how knowing how to take care of a baby would make me more well-rounded. My dad added that the course was much cheaper than a phone, and instead of wasting money on some overpriced gadget, they were giving me something that would prepare me for my future. That was when I asked what future they were talking about, because as far as I knew, I was not planning on having a baby anytime soon, if ever. That was when things really spiraled. My mom looked genuinely offended and said, well, you never know what will happen, and you should be prepared. My dad said I was being ungrateful and spoiled, that they were trying to give me valuable skills instead of feeding into my generation's obsession with screens. I could feel myself getting angrier and angrier, but I tried to keep it together at first. I told them, very calmly, that I appreciated them thinking of me, but this was absolutely not something I wanted or needed, and I felt like they did not actually listen to anything I said. I told them my phone was literally dying, and that it was not about being spoiled, it was about having a functional way to communicate with the world. That was when my mom said something that really sent me over the edge. She said, well, when you have a baby, you will not have time to be glued to your phone anyway. I asked her why she was so convinced I was going to have a baby anytime soon, and she just kind of gave me this pitying look and said, all girls eventually become mothers, sweetie. It is part of life. I told them flat out that I was not interested in having kids, and that even if I was, it would not be for at least 10 years. My dad said I was being dramatic, and my mom started going on about how it is better to be prepared now, because you never know when you might need those skills. At that point, I completely lost it. I told them this was the worst birthday gift I had ever received, and it made me feel like they saw me as some future baby factory instead of their daughter. My dad told me I was acting like a spoiled brat, and my mom said they were just trying to be practical. I ended up locking myself in my room for the rest of the day. I did not eat dinner with them, I did not even have cake. I spent the whole night texting my friends and trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. Since then, things have been tense. My parents are acting like I was completely out of line for not appreciating their thoughtful gift. They keep saying I will thank them someday, and that I am too young to understand why this is important. I feel like they are completely out of touch with reality, but they are so convinced they are right that I have started to wonder if I am the one being unreasonable. I do not think it is crazy to want a functional phone for my birthday, and I definitely do not think it is normal to get a baby care class for a 16-year-old who has never even expressed the slightest interest in babies or parenting. But they are making me feel like I am some selfish monster for being upset about it. So, I guess I am asking, am I overreacting? Am I actually the ungrateful brat they think I am? Or are they living in some weird fantasy world where every teenage girl secretly dreams of baby formula and diaper cream? Update 1. Thank you for all the comments, especially to the ones who said this was strange even for parents who want to teach their children responsibility. It honestly gave me a bit of clarity, because for a while I started questioning myself. I started wondering if I really was being this ungrateful, spoiled brat who couldn't see how thoughtful and practical my parents were being. But seeing so many people say this wasn't normal, even from parents who want their kids to be prepared for adulthood, made me realize I wasn't crazy. There's a difference between teaching life skills and whatever bizarre future prep cult mindset my parents seem to be in. So, after the whole disaster with the birthday gift, I made it absolutely clear I was not going to those courses. My mom kept circling back to it, saying it would be fun, saying I was being too negative, saying I'd get to meet other, young ladies, who were also interested in learning useful skills for their future families. The way she said it made it sound like I was supposed to be excited to join some baby-obsessed sorority. My dad, of course, tried to reframe it as some kind of test of my maturity, like real adults are just naturally drawn to learning how to bathe infants and mash peas. I stood my ground. I said no, over and over, until they finally seemed to back off. They were annoyed, definitely, but they didn't push it further. I thought that was the end of it. At least that's what I thought. A few days later, my mom came into my room. Her whole energy was weirdly cheerful, too cheerful, like she had thought of the most brilliant solution in the world. She said if I didn't want to learn in theory, then I would have to learn in practice. At first, I didn't even understand what she meant. Then she dropped the bomb. She had already arranged with some of her friends that I would be helping them out by watching their kids for free. It was already set up. No discussion. She said it was a win-win, because I would gain invaluable experience and her friends would get a break. I couldn't even speak for a second. It was so out of nowhere, so completely deranged, I actually thought she was joking again. But no. She was 100% serious. She said it was time for me to stop being so selfish, time for me to embrace my role as the eldest daughter and future caregiver. She kept using these weird phrases, like she'd been reading some parenting blog from the 1950s about how girls need to learn to nurture and serve the family to become well-rounded women. It was like I was being drafted into some kind of unpaid baby army. I said no. I said it loudly, clearly, repeatedly. I said I'm not a babysitter, I'm not interested in childcare, and I have my own life. She just smiled in that terrifying way people do when they think they're being patient and reasonable but they're actually steamrolling your entire existence. She said it wasn't up for debate because it was my duty as the eldest daughter to help out. My dad backed her up, saying this was the kind of hands-on experience that would show them how ready I was for adult life. The way they were both talking made it sound like my whole future was already locked in, like they had just quietly decided I was going to become some kind of stay-at-home mom, regardless of what I actually wanted. I kept thinking, okay, they're just talking. They're just making a point. They can't actually expect me to do this. The next day, 2 toddlers were literally dropped off at our house. One was 3 years old, the other was around a year and a half. Both belonged to my mom's friend from her work, who was apparently thrilled that my mom found someone responsible and mature to help out for free. My mom acted like I had agreed to all of this, like this was some prearranged internship I'd enthusiastically signed up for. She handed me a list of instructions, feeding times, diaper changes, nap schedules, and just left me there with them. At first, I thought, okay, if I refuse, they'll get the point. So I said, flat out, I'm not doing this. I'm not their nanny. I didn't agree to this. My mom gave me this whole speech about how family helps family, and how this was my chance to show responsibility and maturity, and how I shouldn't be so selfish when other people need me. It was like every guilt trip I'd ever heard wrapped into one condescending monologue. I told her these kids weren't family, they weren't my responsibility, and I wasn't going to spend my entire day chasing someone else's toddlers around. That was when she pulled out the big guns. She said it was my duty as the eldest daughter to set an example for my younger siblings. That as the oldest girl, it was my job to learn these skills so I could help with my siblings, my future children, and any family emergencies that might come up. She talked like she was training me to be some kind of emergency backup parent. My dad, of course, chimed in that this was just the kind of experience every teenager needed, and that it would teach me patience, time management, and all these other skills that were totally irrelevant to the fact that I was just being forced into unpaid childcare against my will. I kept saying no. They kept ignoring me. The toddlers were already there, running around the house, screaming and making a mess, and my mom just acted like I was on the clock. No discussion, no compromise, just, here's your new life, deal with it. I ended up barricading myself in my room, locking the door while my mom got stuck dealing with the toddlers herself. She was furious, banging on my door, telling me I was being immature and selfish and irresponsible. She actually said that if I didn't learn to embrace these responsibilities now, I was going to be a terrible wife and mother someday, and that no one would want a girl who couldn't even handle basic childcare. I didn't even know how to respond to that. I just sat there, shaking, wondering how I was supposed to deal with people who see me as nothing but a future homemaker in training. They didn't care about my plans, my goals, or the fact that I don't even want kids. To them, that didn't matter. All that mattered was molding me into the kind of person they thought I should be, someone ready to serve, sacrifice, and spend my life taking care of other people. I have no idea how to get through to them. Every time I try to talk, they either dismiss me as immature or double down with more guilt trips and lectures about my duty as the eldest daughter. I feel like they see me less as a person and more as a role they're trying to fill. I'm in shock. I don't even know how to deal with this. Update 2. After that whole nightmare with the toddlers being dropped off and my parents acting like I was some live-in au pair they were entitled to, I realized there was no middle ground with them. There was no reasonable conversation where I could lay out my boundaries and they would nod and agree to respect them. They were so locked into this fantasy version of reality where my life was just a stepping stone to me becoming some homemaker baby factory hybrid, and no amount of logic was going to snap them out of it. That was when I decided that if they were going to treat me like some unpaid, unwilling nanny in training, I was going to fight it directly. Not with screaming or crying, they'd already decided any emotional reaction on my part just meant I was immature and ungrateful, but with sheer, stubborn refusal. I sat down at my desk that night, still shaking with adrenaline, and wrote out a full list of rules. It wasn't some cute, jokey list either. It was blunt, cold, and left no room for misinterpretation. I wrote that I would not change diapers. I would not feed babies from a spoon. I would not bathe anyone, I would not put anyone to bed, and I would not entertain anyone else's children. If they wanted to bring toddlers into the house, that was entirely their problem, but I was not going to lift a finger. I was not the third parent, I was not a free babysitter, and I was not going to be trained like some show dog for a future I didn't even want. The next morning, I taped the list to my bedroom door. My mom saw it first, and for a few minutes, she actually thought it was a joke. She even called my dad over to laugh about how dramatic I was being, saying it was cute that I thought I could set conditions for my own upbringing. But then the next time her friend's toddler was over, because yes, even after my barricade protest, her friends were still dumping their kids at our house like I was running a free daycare, my parents got to see just how serious I was. The second those kids arrived, I went straight to my room, put on my headphones, turned the music up so loud I couldn't hear a thing, and opened a book. I didn't glance at the babies, I didn't acknowledge my mom's increasingly loud comments about how I needed to come help out, and I didn't even flinch when the 1-year-old started shrieking at the top of his lungs. I just sat there, turning pages, drowning out the chaos with music, fully and completely detached from whatever disaster was unfolding outside my door. It took exactly 40 minutes for my mom to completely break down. She burst into my room, absolutely vibrating with fury, and started screaming that I was cruel, heartless, irresponsible, and a disgrace to her as a mother. She said she was ashamed to have raised a daughter who could sit there coldly ignoring helpless children, and she demanded to know who had filled my head with such selfish, unnatural ideas. She didn't want an answer, of course. This was all just a performance, an explosion of all the pent-up frustration she'd been stewing in ever since I dared to say I wasn't interested in her young mommy training camp. In her mind, this wasn't about the toddlers anymore, this was a moral failing, a betrayal of her entire identity as a mother, a slap in the face to the values she believed daughters were supposed to have. My dad joined in, but his angle was different. For him, this was about control and principle. He said that learning to take care of babies wasn't optional for girls, it was mandatory life training, like learning to cook or clean. He kept going on about how every woman needs these skills because every woman eventually becomes a mother, and resisting that was like resisting gravity. It was inevitable, and my refusal to cooperate was, to him, the equivalent of a kid refusing to go to school because they didn't feel like it. That was when I asked why their son, my younger brother, wasn't being signed up for baby care classes, and why no one was expecting him to learn these critical, essential, unavoidable life skills. The answer was so fast and automatic it was clear they'd never even considered the question before. Boys don't give birth, my dad said. Boys don't need to know these things because it's not their natural role. That was the moment it fully clicked for me that this wasn't just about teaching responsibility or life skills. This was full-on gender role brainwashing. This wasn't about me becoming a capable adult. This was about them turning me into the kind of woman they wanted me to be, one who would slip seamlessly into the role of caretaker, homemaker, and future mother without a single protest. It had nothing to do with me, my goals, my life, or my future. It was all about their idea of what daughters are supposed to be and how I was supposed to follow the script they'd already written for me before I even had a chance to decide who I wanted to be. The weirdest part is that this hadn't always been so obvious. My mom worked, after all. My dad had always been proud of his daughter being smart and doing well in school. But now it felt like all of that was just window dressing, a temporary allowance they'd made because I was still a kid. Now that I was 16, they were trying to flip a switch, shove me into this archaic mold, and turn me into a miniature version of my mom, someone who, according to them, was practical, selfless, and prepared for real life, which in their minds apparently just meant being a wife and mother. I thought about running to my grandma's house for a break, just to get out of the pressure cooker, but there's a catch. My grandma is even more old school than my mom. She's the type who thinks girls shouldn't go to college if they already have a boyfriend, because they should be preparing for married life instead. There's a very real chance I'd end up stuck in a house where instead of screaming at me for being selfish, I'd get long, patronizing lectures about how motherhood is the highest calling and I should be grateful my parents are teaching me these valuable skills early. For now, all I can do is sabotage everything I can. Every time they bring a kid over, I disappear. Every time my mom tries to rope me into baby duty, I either lock my door or leave the house entirely. I'm polite about it, as much as I can be, but I've made it clear I am not participating in their twisted little homemaker boot camp. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife, and I know they're just waiting for me to crack, to have some teenage meltdown they can point to as proof that I'm too immature to know what's good for me. I can feel the whole house inching towards some kind of massive explosion. They're getting more frustrated by the day, and I'm getting more stubborn. I'm not going to be their perfect little mommy in training, and they have no idea what to do with a daughter who refuses to follow the script. For now, I'm just sabotaging everything I can, but I feel like an explosion-level scandal is brewing at home. Update 3. Well, it all ended much crazier than I could have imagined. I really packed my things and left for my grandmother's house, dragging my duffel bag across the porch while my mom stood in the doorway, telling me I was overreacting, acting like a spoiled brat. I didn't even respond. I just walked, heart pounding so hard in my ears that I couldn't even hear the front gate slam behind me. My grandmother lives about 20 minutes away, in a smaller house crammed with ceramic angels and crochet doilies, the kind of place that always smells like dust and soup at the same time. It wasn't paradise, but it was quiet, and it was mine, at least for a while. The first week was, okay. Not great, but manageable. My grandmother's old school, so she wasn't exactly teen me, but she also wasn't about to physically drag me back home. She mostly tooted under her breath about family obligations and helping your mother. And then my mom showed up. Not just a casual visit, not a drop-in to check on her runaway daughter. No, she showed up with her lips pressed into that fake smile she uses when she's pretending she's fine. I knew something was wrong before she even sat down. That's when she dropped the bomb. The mandatory baby boot camp, the babysitting, the forced, practical experience, all of it had a purpose. My mother is pregnant. And they had been planning, all along, for me to become what she called her second pair of hands, and what I now realize was supposed to be her unpaid live-in nanny. The only reason they didn't tell me was because they knew, without a doubt, that I would flip out and refuse. So instead, they tried to manipulate me into thinking it was my duty to learn childcare for some vague future, when the whole time they were priming me to step into a role I never asked for and never agreed to. I think what stunned me most wasn't even the pregnancy, though, let's be real, that was a shock. It was how premeditated the whole thing was. They had literally planned my 16th birthday gift around their future need for free childcare. They spent weeks gaslighting me into believing I was the unreasonable one, the ungrateful brat, while they were actively trying to trap me into a caregiver role I never consented to. It wasn't just selfish, it was deceitful in a way that made my stomach turn. I told her, as calmly as I could manage, that if she wanted another baby, that was her choice. But it was not my responsibility, and I would not be taking care of it. I told her I didn't care if they were tired, overwhelmed, or stretched thin. I told her I wasn't their backup parent, and that no amount of guilt-tripping was going to make me change my mind. She cried, of course. My mom's good at crying. She called me selfish, ungrateful, a disappointment. She said all those things you expect a guilt-wielding parent to say, that family is everything, that real daughters don't turn their backs when they're needed, that she and my dad had done so much for me and I couldn't even do this one little thing for them. It was all so predictable it almost felt rehearsed. I didn't care. The last few weeks had burned away any guilt reflex I had left. I didn't owe them my youth, my freedom, or my future just because they decided to have another child. But still my mother calmed down and we talked about how they wanted me to come back. I said I would come back, but on my own terms. I said I didn't want to babysit the kids and that when I was 18 I would go to work and help the family instead of babysit the kids. My parents were happy and said they agreed. Now I'm home, our girls are getting along. I hope my parents understood everything and there won't be any more surprises like that from them.